All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Vault. My name is Jesse Storr. I'm here with Alex Garcia. And today, what we're going to be bringing you is going to be our top 5 tips for hypertrophy when it comes to training, but on a more broad scale. And what we mean by that is basically thinking about how you should be programming, thinking about what goes on in terms of preparation when you're actually going into the gym, and not actually the execution of the reps themselves. So we'll expound on that. It'll make a little bit more sense in a second. And what we're going to do, just so I'm being a little bit more clear, I want to kind of explain the format. What's going to happen is we both have 5 points of our own, right? And what we're going to do is a topic will be introduced. After that topic is introduced, the person who holds or who owns that point of view or that tip, they're going to explain why they chose that tip as being in their top 5. And then the person who introduced it, so the opposite person of whose point it was, will have 1 minute then to respond, either agreeing, disagreeing, rebutting, whatever the case may be, just to give a little bit more perspective, even from that standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. What I want to start off with first, Alex is going to go first. Your first point here, Alex, is setting clear goals. So explain a little bit more about what you mean by that. You have 1 minute starting in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so when it comes to the gym, a lot of times people are coming in here and meandering around, trying out different machines, getting a feel for the gym, which is definitely something like I encourage people to do in the beginning process. The problem is most of the time when it comes to getting consistent with something and seeing progress at anything, really, you've got to set goals. And it's especially important for the gym, especially when you think about the context of progressive overload and, seeing mechanical tension in your reps and really just, having some kind of thought process as you go into the gym each day, rather than you just kind of, haphazardly doing things because you think that this is the right thing to do or this or that. When you have goals, you are, able to start thinking about how your exercise selection is going to, impact your overall fitness goals and things of that nature. So goals are
Boom.
important, really important.
All right. So I agree. I do think goals are super important, just especially when you're focusing your training. I think that's probably the biggest point that you made there that I definitely agree with. And the reason I say that is because it's necessary to track progress, because if you don't have something you're actually progressing towards, then it's hard to actually make any progress. And I'm gonna say that again. It's hard to make actual progress when you don't have something you're progressing towards. So setting that goal is very, very important. What I will say is that it shouldn't be an end all be all. And what I mean by that, and I don't think that's what you're saying at all, Alex, I just want to kind of clear this up, is I think a lot of people set goals and that's it. And they don't really work out or kind of map out the steps required to actually get that goal done. So, for example, you have somebody say, I want to lose 20 pounds. Okay, well, your mistake would be if you don't actually map out the caloric deficit you need to be in to lose that 20 pounds, or the time frame is going to take to do so, when you're actually trying to get that done, if that makes sense. But yeah, I definitely do
Yeah.
agree in general, though.
Yes, sir. Clarity is key. All right. Yeah. So now we're going on talking about the next topic. Jesse, we were talking a little bit about this earlier today, introducing a novel stimulus. So go ahead and expound upon that for us. Give us some information on that.
Yeah, man. So, biggest thing here is you just want to change up the focus of the training or the training format in some type of way. That might be changing up the reps, increasing the reps. That might be decreasing the reps and increasing the weight. That might be changing certain advanced lifting techniques, adding in some cluster sets, some EMOM, some AMRAPs, whatever the case may be. You want to try to do something that's going to involve something new. And the reason this is because there's a really small window, I will say about 4 weeks, the first 4 weeks for any training cycle, that you can really take advantage of, where your body is like a sponge and it adapts very, very well in terms of strength, in terms of muscle size or muscle gain. And so if you don't regularly introduce this in, especially after a deload, and we'll talk about this in a second as well, it can be something that you leave a lot of gains on the table for. So if you at least try to give something new to your body, it doesn't mean switching up all the time. It just means for a set time, every time you come up with a deload, you should be trying to introduce something new, because you can really take advantage of the benefits from that.
All right. Okay, yeah. So novel stimulus, I'm right there with you. It's really important to understand, you know, there's only so many things we can manipulate, but when you think about it, it's actually a lot. Like sets times reps times load, that progressive overload equation right there. As long as those three things are being manipulated in some way and you're able to, continue that over time. And that's the key thing is like, yes, those first 4 weeks are critical. You can see a ton of gains because your body is much more sensitive to activity and like in the gym and things of that nature. But one thing I also think about when you say this that's important to distinguish is that you don't want to be changing things up like every week, right? You want to have like 4 week blocks where you're really focusing on particular movements, and then maybe over the course of time you do variations or you increase something like the sets, the reps, like the basic stuff. But then you also have things that you do with the movements, over time. Just basically thinking about it as not as like something that you got shock the muscle, and all of that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Definitely agree. All right. Tip number 2 for Alex Garcia. We got motivation behind exercise selection. So explain what you mean by that, Alex.
People they get with certain coaches and or they see things on the internet and they think that they have to do certain exercises because this is what was done by this person or whatever. But a lot of times what I've noticed is that people are motivated. Oh, well, there's the timer. But
Yeah, keep
people are
going.
motivated. I'll just keep talking. Motivating people are motivated more so by the things that they actually like to do. So, when it comes to selecting exercises, like, you know, obviously there is some level of discomfort in terms of, trying new things and working on your weaknesses, but there's still variations that work better for certain situations. And, it's really important to remember, like things like stimulus to fatigue ratio. Some people don't really see that as something you have to worry about in the gym, but the difference between doing a hack squat and a back squat can be huge for your training. A lot of times people think you're doing back squats because that's what you're supposed to do, 5 sets, 10 to 15, like Tom Platz or whatever. But oftentimes I found that you can supplement exercises like the hack squat or even the Smith machine squat and see even better gains than what I got from back squat. So yeah, motivation behind exercise selection is really important.
Okay. I definitely do agree. This is one point I definitely do agree on. I think understanding what a movement actually does and how the muscles involved actually work to actually complete that movement is probably one of the most overlooked things, but also one of the most overestimated things. And the reason I say that is you hear people all the time giving these really weird justifications or just these like unvalidated justifications for why they do certain things, why they choose the exercises they choose.
Like mental
Um,
gymnastics.
Exactly, right. And in reality, if you really know how to understand this, if you know how the body actually works, and you actually know the kinematics involved in like the basic bio mechanics when you're doing the movements, you can get the programming so structured that you end up with a very balanced look while also bringing up certain weak areas that maybe you're kind of lacking in and that you want to bring up as well. So just understanding even how to program that or why you're programming something is super important as well. So keep that in mind.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. So now we're moving on to our next point, keeping it going here, guys. This was actually supposed to be Jesse's first point, but we'll make it the second point. Is deloading every 8 to 10 weeks. So, Jesse, tell us a little bit about deloading, why it's important.
For sure, for sure. So, and it's funny because after I sent you that, I kind of recanted my statement. I was like, do I actually go 8 to 10 weeks? Not really. So I say deload every 6 to 8 weeks. And I think you
Mm-hmm.
could push it to 8 to 10. I just think for most people, it probably is good to just stick with 6 to 8. And that's if you're training hard. I guess that's the caveat there. But personally, this is something I just neglected to do for a long time. And I would be feeling really good training. And then all of a sudden, just I wouldn't feel as good, or I had a couple of injuries that come up. And so once I started understanding why to take a deload, how to actually, properly do it, it became something that actually was like a weapon because you can really know how to program the right way. And what happens if you don't actually take a deload, you're going to have some diminishing returns, like your strength, your ability to actually put on muscle is going to be affected. Even your central nervous system is going to take a lot of fatigue, your hormones, your adaptability in the gym. There's a lot of things that could be affected, which in the end is just going to either lead to injury or, again, like I just said, ultimately going to prevent you from actually having the ability or high ability to actually put on muscle.
Right. Yeah. I'll let you put on the timer first, but I'll just go ahead and start talking. Yeah. So deloading, this is an interesting one for me because I agree. I think deloading actually is important, but I have heard, I've been, following a current hypertrophy coach. He's a PhD in kinesiology. His name is Paul Carter, and he was talking a little bit about why sometimes deloading actually doesn't really have as much of a benefit as a lot of people think. But generally, from what I've understood, and really, it's just I think deloading is also just about listening to your body. Like more than anything, like if you feel like by 6 weeks, if you're doing like let's say you're going through a strength block, right? If you're going through something like it's much more intense, chances are you're probably going to be a little bit beat up by the end of that block. And I would definitely want to take a deload, especially if I'm about to transition into something else and I want to have my nervous system intact, and like just dispel some of that fatigue. But it's really important that deloads are not like over what's the word?
Overvalued.
Uh,
like overvalued.
Overvalued. Yes, exactly. That's what I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
agree.
say that sometimes I think people overvalue the deload as well. Like they think
they
it's an essential piece.
Mm-hmm. And I know some people who take deloads even more frequently, not like every 4 weeks, and I don't really believe in doing that either. I think you kind of throw yourself off the groove a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's
man,
more of an intuitive thing,
Yeah, I do think so too. All right, tip number 3 from Alex Garcia. We got focusing on the setup. So explain a little bit about that, Alex.
So this one's really basic, and I think that it needs to be said. I'm a commercial gym trainer. I see this all the time. My biggest pet peeve is like when you're benching, when you're doing like a flat bench. If you're barbell benching, okay, and you're one of those people that has left shoulder pain, right? Probably have some shoulder instability. If I see you benching with your back flat on the bench, no leg drive, like nothing, glutes coming off the bench, everything. That's all that is just a little bit more attention to how you place yourself before the weight comes off the rack. Okay. Like getting yourself set up, that if you pay attention to that, that's how you can standardize your results and see better progress, because you will actually have a better understanding of how your body is responding to the movement. And, especially with compound movements, the setup, you're setting yourself up for success, but you can easily fail if something goes wrong with your setup.
This is honestly another great point to consider even before starting an exercise, because it's super important. I mean, very important. And putting yourself in the best position to be able to actually maximize the mechanical tension experienced by that muscle in the set is, I mean, it's really important. But the reality is, and what's tough is that you get better at this. And one of the only ways for you to get better at this is just through experience. And so at least that's how I find it for me. And what I mean by that is going to different gyms with different equipment that you might not have used before. The more experience you have with getting yourself in the right position, the easier you're going to be able to make small adjustments and small tweaks, even when it comes to clients, to be able to put them in a better position. But again, I think this still goes back to my last point about, or maybe it was your last point. Either way, understanding how, and I think it was your point actually, understanding how the body works, how it moves, understanding the biomechanics. That's where you can actually put yourself in the best position to say, okay, well, what's the easiest, bar path or the easiest range of motion to be able to maintain this and maximize that essentially.
Right. Yeah. And just to add on to that, I think also when you think about how different everybody's bodies are, people are everyone's built a little bit different. The setup changes for each, like depending on each person, and not just on anatomically, but like, even in your cohort, like if you're an older person or you're a younger person, you like, if I'm training somebody on bench, a former athlete, a younger person, I'm probably going to ask them, I demand more from their thoracic mobility and get a little bit more arch in their back. Like, so you slide a piece of paper, like I always say, slide something, be able to slide my hand under your back when you set up, because when you do that too, it just helps you keep other things in line. Like, they also tell you just retract your scapulas. Though all of those things work together. They work together. So you want to be focusing on the setup every time, because you're not going to necessarily always remember every single little thing about the setup. But if you have a habit of just doing it, that's how you end up with great lifts every single time. So,
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, so going into the next tip that Jesse has here for us today is training hard. So this one's pretty straightforward, I think. Jesse, take it away.
This timer going. All right. So yes, it is straightforward, but it is nuanced as well. So training with intensity, no matter what, I think is something you should do. I think there's caveats to it. And the reason I'll say that is because, and training with intensity to me means training to failure. So that's one thing I will say. Now, if you're a beginner, and this is where we'll differ a little bit in your next point. If you're a beginner, I feel like you should train hard, but I feel like you have to work your way up to that point, or either you're going to overdo it on your central nervous system, or some other things could happen. But what I want to say here, if you're doing hella volume, okay, you should probably not go to failure as often. And I think that's something that is just across the board. Another thing I will say is you should probably train a little less frequent the more to failure you go. And not every single set in your workout should be to failure. Maybe one set out of every single exercise is going to go to failure. If I'm doing 2 sets to failure for anything, then I definitely don't need to do 2 sets on every single thing to failure. So that's another caveat there. I'm gonna take like 20 more seconds. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, bro. Go off, bro.
With this, just like we talked about before, you're going to have diminishing returns when it comes to even like the deload, like I was talking about, why you actually need the deload. If you train to failure too often, right? And this even comes into play when you actually are scheduling out your session. So what I'm saying here is the frequency of your training should basically reflect your recovery. So if I'm telling myself that I want to train to failure for 2 sets for back every single time I train back, everything I train for back is I'm going to do 2 sets of failure, and you don't recover by the next time you need to train back, then you maybe need to go down to 1 set to failure. Maybe not every single exercise you need to go to failure if you still don't recover by the time next time you train back, or your entire split needs to be changed, itself. But I think that's just kind of just something that should be thrown in there, because some things do recover faster than others, and that's fine. But understanding how your body works, how fast it recovers, and how much, damage you can actually take, and how intense you can actually train. Because again, the enhanced lifter is going to be able to train more intense, more frequent. So if you're a natural lifter, you got to be paying attention even more so. So that's another thing to kind of throw in there as well. But yeah, take the floor, Alex. I didn't mean to step on your toes or nothing like that.
Oh, you're good, brother. Good. You do your thing, man. That's what we're here to do. All right. So I would have to agree with most of that. I will say that when it comes to understanding how to train hard, if you've never experienced failure, you probably don't know, you won't understand training to failure. But so one of the things that's okay, there we go. One of the things that's really important about, like you were saying, like managing your fatigue, making sure that you're not training to failure on every set. But there's really conflicting opinions on this. There's lots of people who say you should train to failure multiple sets, or you should train close to failure. But there's actually current research right now indicating that like training to failure is better than training close to failure. Like there's more benefits and adaptations that occur as a result of training to failure than not training to failure. So when it comes to seeing results and progress, as a beginner, I feel like it's really important to understand, that. And that, I think also, you don't really experience mechanical tension when you don't train to failure. So and also, the modalities of lifting here too. Like if you're a power lifter, no, you're not going to train to failure hardly ever. You're going to focus really hard on, staying at a certain RPE. Bodybuilding, however, is a little bit different. Like it depends. It really depends on what you're trying to do. Like, and this kind of brings us up to our next point about training, like learning to train optimally, and like what's the priority there? Like, should we train hard or train optimal? Um, but yeah, Jesse, tell us. That's the tip that we were going to talk about, correct? Or
Yeah, and if you want, you can go right into it. I'll start the timer for you right now because what
all right,
Alex's
yeah.
next point is, and it's a good little segue. Is just training hard first, before you learn to train optimally. So, Alex, 1 minute on the clock. Let's try to stay as much on the clock as we can, just because we don't want to make
Stay
this
on.
too long. We run a little bit out of time.
Yes, sir. Okay, so I'll keep this quick then. So training when it comes to training hard, okay, it's really important that you learn about things like mechanical tension and progressive overload, but also over time, you know, training optimally, you learn to optimize the harder you train. But that's the thing that a lot of people are not doing these days that I see all the times. Like they're doing a lot of these variations of, doing things optimally, right? Doing, and like I agree with optimizing to a certain degree, like there's a lot, like really hypertrophy training is functional. Like, and that Paul Carter, that's that guy, that I referenced before. He's big on, he repeated that hypertrophy is functional. So when it comes to that, yeah. Anyways, go ahead. Let's get into it.
All right. What I will say, I think that this is a very nuanced point. But
Mm-hmm.
generally, just a statement made, I do disagree with a little bit. The reason I say that is because I think people do overthink it. I think that the word optimal and all that gets thrown around a whole lot for nothing. Just like we talked about before, people
Mm-hmm.
not actually understanding how the body works, but want to make all these BS, reasons for why they do stuff to justify it. But the main reason I say that somebody should essentially learn how to train optimally before they train before or learn how to train ultimately before they train hard is because one of two things. If you say that, then you're implying the person is a
Mm-hmm.
beginner. Because again, in my mind, I'm thinking if somebody knows how to train optimally, they're probably an advanced lifter anyway. So for beginners, for that specific point I'm making, I think that you will run into a couple problems if you don't do that. For one, if they're a beginner, priority number one should be learning how to lift safe and learn how to lift optimally at the same time.
Right.
Once you in turn do that and you get stronger and stronger and stronger, your central nervous system responds, it adapts. You're going to get stronger. Your muscles are going to grow as well. At that point, you will end up being able to train harder and harder and harder to a point where it's also safe. If you tell a beginner to train hard, like you said, they probably don't know what failure is. But if they go and watch a Tom Platz video, like you said, or some other bullshit like bodybuilding video, and they go and try to do something like that or try to push themselves to some extent, it just could be, to me, backwards almost. So I always, when I first start with clients, I always start them around like 3 to 4 minimum RIR, like nothing deeper than that into the set or to failure. And then we work our way up till we can actually work up safely to a set of failure. What I know you can actually either handle it and you know exactly what that looks like and how you should do it, kind of. And the only reason I'll say this is
Right.
because it will either lead to injury sometimes, or it'll just, yeah, I just say injuries. I think the main thing I'm always worried about when it comes to either working with clients or just people who are beginners. So I'll just leave it there because I already went over.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So moving forward, and we'll definitely have to make some more videos about this in the future.
Oh no,
Um,
we will for sure.
let's talk about training more of what you want to grow. So tell us a little bit about training what you want to grow more.
Yeah, and I'm gonna keep this one pretty short because I did go over the last two, but I just feel like
Mm-hmm.
you should train whatever you want to grow 2 to 4 times a week. That's what I tell all my clients, and that's what we do. That's what I do. And it's really that simple. Like once you figure out, a program or a structure that works for you, some type of split that works for you, and you can be able to build in to train whatever you want to improve 2 to 3 times a week. It's honestly that simple. Now the more you do train that muscle group in a week, I will say this, you do have to be smart about a few things. Number one, how much volume are you doing? You need to be aware of that at least because you need to, again, minimize the volume or bring the volume down just a little bit if you're going to train it more in the week. So if I'm training legs 3 times a week, I don't need to be doing, 8 sets of legs every single time I go and go train legs. It's just a little bit much. Second thing, how many days in between those sessions are actually or do I actually have, right? So if I'm training on
Yeah.
Monday and I train again on Wednesday, that might not be enough time. Keep that in mind as well. Number three, how
Right.
often are you going to failure within those sessions? Because again, it comes to how well you're actually recovering and all the other stuff we already talked about as well. So just make sure you're also being consistent because, like we talked about earlier, what Alex mentioned, if you try to do this for 2 weeks, you're not going to improve. You got to stay on this for, at least 4, 6, 8 weeks, even longer than that, in my opinion, if you really want to improve a body, a muscle group, because it takes time to build muscle. It takes a lot of time.
It sure
Promise you.
does. It sure does. Yeah, no, I have to agree with this one. The concept of optimal frequency, it really just boils down to, like you were saying, really just 2 times a week, like training each, like whatever muscle group you want to grow 2 times a week. One thing I will say about this one too is, like, some people think you got to spam certain movements to see growth, right? Like you've heard it before, spam lateral raises. Definitely works for sure. But you definitely want to be careful again with, like you were talking about earlier, diminishing returns and things of that nature. When you're training to failure and you're training hard on a regular basis, you're going to have better mind muscle connection with those movements that you've been working on for a little while. You're going to feel like you can keep going and pushing and pushing and pushing, but that's, like he was saying, like managing that fatigue and kind of seeing, like, okay, yeah, I definitely don't need to do like 4 sets of like 15 to 20 reps here. And I think that's another thing to like pay attention to here, is like the rep ranges, right? I see way too many people doing sets of 15 to 20, and if you're talking about diminishing returns, like especially on a muscle group that is that you're focused on training, you'll see way quicker diminishing returns going the more total volume you do. So you do want to spread that out over the course of a week, and in that way too, it also helps you stay fresh with the movement. A lot of people, with a lot of clients that I've worked with, I always try to tell them, rest is rust, man. Active rest is the way to go. So, keeping active rest and, that optimal frequency is key. And I think that's another thing that is really helpful for the accountability side of things too, is like, okay, if I really want to grow, I got to make sure that I get into the gym. And that's how people stay consistent, over the course of time. So, yeah, man.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know how much
definitely
time
forgot
we
to
have.
start the timer.
That's all good.
But
Yeah, I was
um,
just ballparking that real
nah, no,
quick.
you're good. I will say we only have 1 minute left. I didn't. Yeah, we got to upgrade our Zoom, so it's gonna cut out. I apologize. But what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna go to end it right now. We're just gonna come back in and just finish it off because all we got is one more
And
point
just
for each of
finish
us.
it out. Yep, sounds
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
All right, I'm
we
about to
still
end it
in the
right now.
early stages, y'all.
We working it out. Some technical difficulties, but we working it out. All right, man, I'll see you in a second.
All right, sounds good.
All right, back like we never left. All right, so we got 1 point each that we have left. Alex, last point you got here. Stop avoiding cardio. Let us know how you feel about cardio.
Well, there's definitely a couple of different things with cardio. One is, there's a stigma around cardio. If you're trying to build muscle, right? You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, like you do too much cardio, you're not gonna build any muscle, bro." First of all, like, cardio is one of those things that you do when you are when you were going through the process of like strength training and things of that. You're getting yourself in, doing some cardio, just doing that. Like, the concept of cardio is, it should not be removed from muscle building. That's one point. Second thing is, it's a heart health thing. If you want to be healthy as an individual, like, sometimes strength training, that doesn't always necessarily translate to wellness, right? Cardio helps you stay well. Also, it's just good for your mental, and it helps you clear up brain fog. And you just don't want to take it out of your routine just in the name of trying to get stronger, and also just general health, and also with calories too. Like, if you're trying to manage calories and manage your intake, cardio is a tool, so you got to make use of that.
Excuse me. Okay, so overall, cardio is definitely necessary. From an overall health standpoint, I think even from the mental fog, mental clarity standpoint, metabolism, just cardiovascular, all that necessary. Do it. I'm an advocate for it. What I think the only thing you need to do really is 20 or 30 minutes getting your heart rate between 120 to 140. Now, I think this is not separate from what Alex is saying, because it's not like he's sitting here saying you need to do an hour a day. But what I will say there is, when I say that's all you need, I mean, stop over valuing and what's the right word? Um, it's overrated in general, cardio, in terms of balancing
Yes.
out certain weight loss goals. And the reason I say that, because your focus should really just be on nutrition, eating a high protein, clean diet in a caloric deficit. If you do that,
Yes.
then you will lose weight, and no amount of cardio is going to help you do that if you're not on top of the nutrition. So that's the only thing I'll say there with that one point.
Yes, sir. Yeah. All right. Nice. Yeah, dude. Okay, cool. So last tip here for you, and I think this is an important thing. I think like it kind of takes from that last point, is recovery, prioritizing your recovery, and how cardio can kind of plays into that in some aspects. Jesse, take it away. Let's talk about some recovery.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, yes, definitely prioritize your recovery. That's going to involve nutrition, stress management, sleep, active recovery, like I was saying earlier, all of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's some little things you can take away from this in terms of how you can do this, right? You want to make sure you're getting at least 8 hours of sleep every night. I would say as close to, but if we're being honest, I try to tell my clients get 8 if you can. If you can get to bed earlier, get 8, because from just all these things that happen in your sleep, hormone regulation, even growth hormone production,
Mm,
even just getting on like your right circadian rhythm for you to be able to kind of just be function at a high level without having all these other downstream effects or things happening from not getting enough sleep.
protein
It's
synthesis.
huge. It's paramount. So get enough sleep. Prioritize protein as well. Make sure you're prioritizing protein so you can actually recover at a higher rate too. And that just means even making sure you get enough calories in general, but that's for another day too. Find ways to keep your stress levels down, because this is a silent killer when it comes to gains. The higher the cortisol levels in your body, the harder it is to build muscle. Remember that as well. Get the blood moving throughout the day. All right. Try to just move as much as you can on your rest days as well, as much as you can. Let me back up. Not as much as you can. Get enough in is what I'm saying. Don't just sit down on your rest days and do nothing. You should have a couple rest days where maybe you just do nothing and you're just trying to recover. But on the other rest days, walk, stationary bike, stretching. It doesn't matter. Whatever you do, all these things actually have, research backed, to actually say that it helps you with your recovery and to make sure that you can hit the next session even sooner and even harder than you did last time. So stop neglecting the recovery and just make sure you do something. That's really all it really is. Stop being lazy.
Yes. Yeah. Love that. Yeah,
Nah,
man.
but dang, made it to the end. Oh wait, hold up.
Yes, sir.
You got a rebuttal. Hold up. Let me put the
I was
timer
about to
on.
say, yeah, let me
Excuse me.
cap it off here. Yeah. Dude, everything you just said, I agree with, honestly. Like this is probably a point of, it's not really a point of contention. Like recovery is honestly arguably more important than training in some ways because, unless you are training hard, like, unless you're training like really often, or you're training for a marathon or something like that, like recovery is one of those things where you're not going to benefit from pushing yourself as hard as you can every single time. I realize that. I've gone through that as a lifter.
Yeah, I
It's
had to learn
something
that
I
the hard
wish.
way.
Yeah, I wish that I had learned that. What, like I used to think like, oh, never give up and all this. Like, nah, bro, like go home. Like
Know
there
when to
has to
go
be a
home.
point where you freaking go home. Yes.
Yeah.
So recovery, sleep, like you were saying, hormone regulation, protein synthesis, all these different bodily processes happening. And during that time, you cannot deny your body of that and expect to see change or see growth, right? So, sleep is really important. And just opening yourself up to different modalities too, like yoga and stretching on your active rest days. I would say is probably one of the best things that you can do just to help you like recenter yourself mentally and emotionally, but also give yourself, your nervous system, a break, or also help you coordinate certain muscle groups, because sometimes you may be training very specifically and you may need to like reconnect with certain parts of your body that you may not be training as much. So those active recovery days are crucial for that as well. And yeah, like you were saying, stationary bike, I would say incline walking. And one thing I've been using a lot lately, I see a lot of people doing it, knees over toes guys popularize this, is walking backwards. Getting some walking backwards in on an active recovery day, definitely a good idea. Like again, coordination, maybe a little bit of skill development, if you will. Tom Haviland has also done that. He's big on, doing plyometrics and stuff on his rest days, and just keeping your rest days. Your low, what you want to do is build your low intensity capacity, just like you do your high intensity capacity. And that way you can start to recover even quicker and better each time, just like Jesse was talking about. Yeah. So yeah, recovery is huge, dude.
Recovery is huge. And I like what you said, honestly, that first point you made. It probably is really more important from a muscle building standpoint than the actual training in the gym, other than just creating the initial stimulus or damage that you do in the gym. But that recovery aspect is where you actually grow. So keeping that in mind, I think just, that's why I chose to have that as my last point, is driving home that point about not neglecting recovery and actually doing everything you can to try to improve your recovery, because it really does make a difference. I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference.
Yep,
but yeah,
it
man,
does.
that's it. That's our top 5 tips, each of us, for
Top 5 tips,
hypertrophy.
bro.
Hey, for hypertrophy, we ain't even gonna talk about that. Top 5 tips for hypertrophy on from a training side on a more broad scale. So let us know in the comments what you guys think. We are planning on doing something more intricate in terms of the actual top 5 tips for training while you're actually in the gym, like the actual execution. So that's going to be coming out as well. Some nutrition stuff. We got a lot of stuff coming. So y'all just, it's getting good. It's only getting better. I'm telling you.
I know.
I'm telling you. We're working out the kinks, but it's getting better.
Sir.
I'm excited. But yeah, man, appreciate your time today, brother. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. All right. All right.
Yes,
See y'all next time.
Y'all
Oh, by the way,
one.
before we go, hold up. Make sure y'all subscribe. Tell everybody else to subscribe. Send it to people.
Go like, comment, and share.
All of that. I'm telling y'all, do it. We got socials as well. I'm gonna leave down there. Again, the Vault Podcast Official. We haven't really posted that on Instagram or TikTok yet, so just it's coming.
We getting there. We just gotta build up the content.
Right? We getting there. We getting there. But yeah, man, appreciate y'all rocking with us, and we're gonna keep getting better. All right, man. I'll see you next week.
Eat your protein. Eat your protein.
Eat your protein. Make sure you eat your protein. I forgot. I almost forgot. Thank you for reminding me, Alex. Reminding people. Eat your protein. Eat your
protein.
Hold up. I'm covered today. Eat
your protein. All
right, brother.
All right, man. Take it easy, my friend.
You too, man.